Here's a question I've asked a number of times. Would my dad, he's been gone now for many years, but would he recognize the Democratic Party today as the one he reverenced when he was a young guy? And is there a disconnect somehow between, I'll call them the classical issues and ideals of the Democratic Party and what it at least appears to represent today? So I'm being a little provocative, but given my own background and my own memory of my father and my strong kind of Democratic formation, speak to that a little bit if you could. Would my dad recognize the party today?
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. I found a very interesting clip of Bishop Barron talking to a liberal congressman, and I want to show a part of their conversation that's really, really intriguing. So Barron starts by reflecting upon his upbringing, on his dad, who was kind of like this old school Democrat, who greatly admired JFK and really believed in kind of that liberal vision of common good, public service, decency, etc., for the working man. He basically asked his congressman what happened and if his dad would still be a Democrat in 2025. And it seems that the congressman says that no, he doesn't think that his dad would be a Democrat. And then he goes and he talks about the basic stuff that Americans should be concerned about: jobs, healthcare, their kids' future, etc. And he basically mentions and thinks that we need to avoid the extremes of both parties. And he says that oftentimes the left is attacked for their extremists more so than the right. So let's watch this whole conversation. It's very, very fascinating. And then I will reflect upon what they said from a Christian perspective at the end.
Here's a question I've asked a number of times. Would my dad, he's been gone now for many years, but would he recognize the Democratic Party today as the one he reverenced when he was a young guy?
Yeah, I think he'd have a hard time with it.
Yeah,
we may have lost him and guys like him were he alive today. I'd say that I'm a new kind of old-fashioned Democrat.
Yeah,
and I think of Truman and I think of Kennedy and the Bobby
Hubert
Kennedy.
Humphrey,
and
maybe.
My father loved Hubert Humphrey.
Yeah.
I grew up in a house with a picture of John F. Kennedy and my father campaigning together in 1960.
Oh, wow.
I have that picture in my office. If you ask the American people what are the issues they care about, they'll say they care about the economy, they care about immigration, they care about taxes, they care about crime, and they care about healthcare. If you ask those same people, what do you think the Democrats care about? They say they care about choice, they care about LGBT, they care about healthcare, which is crossover with healthcare. They care about saving democracy, and they care about climate. So there's a disconnect between what the people are talking about and what are all very important issues that they see the Democrats as being standing for, but really you're not going to build a party around that unless you talk about the economy, immigration, taxes, crime, and healthcare.
That's very interesting to me. Is it time, therefore, for a kind of retooling? You think of when Clinton won the presidency in 92. Democrats had lost Reagan 1980, Reagan 84, and then Bush 88, right? They lost 3 presidential elections in a row. And then they decided, okay, we got to retool a little bit here. And then they moved to the center with Bill Clinton.
Yeah, Bill Clinton did the whole Democratic Leadership Council thing.
Is it time for that again? A time for the Democratic Party to kind of recenter itself?
Yeah, I think that's going on. Listen, the Democrats stand for the same things they've always stood for. Part of it is is how you have to, number one, have a platform. That's a piece of it. What's your platform? And you have to be very definitive about this is my platform. And again, the issues that people are talking about, economy, immigration, et cetera. But then you have to figure out how to communicate that, because the media environment is so fractured these days. It's no longer, ABC and CBS and NBC and, maybe the cable channels and the newspapers. As a matter of fact, Democrats do very well with people who do the traditional media.
Yes, right.
But there's 5 pieces now. There's traditional media, there's social media, there's the new long-form podcasts, even this show would be an example of that.
Yeah.
Then there's national media, and then there's this like sub rosa stuff, which on WhatsApp and WeChat and ethnic things.
And they're all different. They're all very different.
They're all very different, and they take a lot of time. And Trump figured that out before anybody else did.
Yeah.
And he knows how to play in each of those areas and has organizations in each of those areas. And you get a crazy Democrat that says something that's really way out there, and the established this well-run organization of how to influence the media, says the Democrats.
Right.
You could have a council person in Oshkosh. They say the Democrats.
Right.
Whereas, the Republicans have people that are a little bit out there, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert and others. You can't say the Republicans because Trump is the voice. Biden was not the greatest communicator in the world, so he couldn't be the definitive source. And so the Democrats have become defined not by what they're doing only, but defined by their adversary saying, that's what you guys represent.
Yeah.
So
no, I get that, and I won't compel you to say it. I'll say it. If AOC and Bernie Sanders are the face of the Democratic Party, I think you're in trouble.
No, we won't win. We need them, but that won't go beyond.
But you
that
won't
go beyond the base, and it won't get the middle, and it won't get the independents, and it won't get those folks that are even disgruntled Republicans.
So it sounds like you are motivated to get people like my poor father, it was long gone, but to get someone like my father back to the Democratic Party.
So in my race for Congress, Donald Trump won my district by 19,000 votes.
Yeah.
So for me to win by 11,000
It's kind of amazing.
Yeah, well, I don't want to say it's amazing.
For a Democrat to win in a district that Trump carried.
Yeah, so I think there were 13 throughout the country. I was one of the biggest swings.
That's interesting.
So 19,000 for him, I won by 11,000.
So how do you explain that?
At least 20,000 people who voted for him had to vote for me.
How do you explain that?
There's different populations. There's a lot of the blue-collar building trades, carpenters, electricians, laborers, steam fitters, that they know me. They know Tommy, and that he's going to fight for them, and that he's not way out there extreme. Because a lot of the unions, their leadership will support the Democrats, but the members voted for Trump.
Yeah.
Then I have a lot of Jewish voters in my district who are not happy with a lot of Democrats that have not been as pro-Israel as I think they should be. They know that they can trust me, and they voted for me as well, even though they probably voted for Trump. Some of them voted for Trump. And then a third population, I have an interesting district in that over 20% of my district is Asian and South Asian, Chinese, Korean, Indian, and Pakistani. And these are traditional people.
Yeah, right.
For the most part, most of them are religious, not all, but most of them are religious. They family, hard work, education, safety. And if they don't feel that they can trust you on those, for years, look what happened in this last election. A lot of African Americans, a lot of Latinos, a lot of Asians and South Asians voted for Trump. Historically, they would have voted for the Democrats because the Republicans, they don't like us. There's a lot of racists. There's a lot of, bad views of us because we've got different color skin. That's with all these different groups. And that was enough. Now that a lot of these folks peeled off to go vote for Trump because that wasn't enough anymore because of this view of how the Democrats have gone off too far off to the left.
My own take, honestly, I think Democrats went too enthusiastically down woke road, and they were perceived, now maybe it's unfair, but perceived as the party of wokeism, and most of the country is not there. And then your point, too, about the working class, I think is dead right, that it used to be in my father's day, of course, working class party was the Democratic Party. Not as much now, where it seems like more of an elite Upper East Side kind of, or, Malibu sort of party. And that's not going to work, is it?
I don't know if you remember the book, What's the Matter with Kansas? When people were voting against their own, this is literally more than a decade ago. I can't even remember how long ago it was. It was about people voting against their own economic interests because of a lot of the cultural issues that they just didn't see the Democrats as being in there. So I believe, the Democrats are in favor of raising the minimum wage. The Republicans are not. The Democrats are in favor of building the strength of unions. The Republicans are not. I've got a bill that I would say, I'll give you a corporate rate tax discount if you share 5% of your stock with your lowest 80% wage earners of your firm, which I think is going to become more and more important with AI and the idea of becoming more of an ownership society where people can own stock. But we have to figure out how to lift up the working man and woman in our country. And I don't care whether you're a left-wing progressive or a right-wing conservative. Everybody in America should believe that if you're willing to work hard, in return for working hard, you make enough money so that you can buy a house, educate your children, pay for health insurance, and retire one day without being scared. That's the American dream. And we don't have that for a lot of people in our country, and they're angry about it.
Let's stay with the economy for a second, because I want to ask you about another New York congressman, but from a last generation, namely Jack Kemp. Kemp is someone whom I admired. He was called a bleeding heart conservative, right? Namely, a lot of liberal ideals and liberal ends of lifting up the poor and helping the poor, but often using more conservative means. So not the handout, but the lift up and enterprise zones and investing in the cities and so on. Is that still a viable option? You think the Jack Kemp idea of lifting up the poor by lifting up the economy, investing creatively in it, still a good idea?
Well, we have to recognize, yes, it's about the economy. It's about creating jobs, but it's about creating jobs that pay enough money.
Yeah.
So if the minimum wage is $7.25 an hour federally,
Yeah.
that's still 20 states have a $7.25 minimum wage. Let's say you make $10 an hour and you work 40 hours a week and you work 50 weeks a year, you only get 2 weeks vacation. That's $20,000 a year.
Yeah.
$15 an hour, 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year, that's $30,000 a year. You're not going to buy a house, educate your children, pay for health insurance, and put some money aside for your retirement. So in the let's talk about, you like the movies, right?
Yeah.
So remember the movie Wall Street with Michael Douglas,
sure.
Greed is Good?
Right.
We were worried in the 1980s when you and I were growing up that the Japanese and the German car companies were going to take over everything in America, and they were just beating us. And Milton Friedman wrote his famous paper, and he said, stop worrying about the employees, stop worrying about the community you're in, just take care of the shareholder, and you'll make a lot of money, and everything will work out. And we did that.
Yeah.
And we made a lot of money. It worked. Michael Douglas said, greed is good. Gordon Gekko, greed is good. The GDP in America has gone up 1,500% since then. The Dow Jones has gone up 2,500%. We made a lot of money. The problem is we didn't share it with the people who go to work every day.
Yeah.
So another movie, Pretty Woman, with Richard Gere and
Julia Roberts.
Yeah. So in that movie, he's going to buy the company of the old man.
Right.
And the old man says, Ralph Bellamy, he says, we're going to sell off the shipyard. He says, oh, there's 3,000 jobs there. The town will be devastated. He said, yeah, but we'll make a lot of money.
Right.
So that's what happened in our country, is in the search for profits, understandably so, globalization, everything else, we left behind these towns, we left behind these workers, and the communities that used to be these robust places where if you had a problem, you had health insurance, you had your job, you had this pension. Now these people are unhappy. They're left behind a polluted site. Their churches are empty. There's no more Rotary Club. There's no more Elks Club. There's no more, the kids are doing fentanyl and methamphetamine, and these people are angry.
Absolutely right. Can I try to link it to two now Republican figures? I think are saying something similar. One, Marco Rubio, in the common good conservatism, so-called, right? Remember the speech he gave at Catholic University, where he said, look, I'm not advocating a Milton Friedman, anything goes, free market, or Gordon Gekko and all that, but rather an economy that improves people's lives, and not just the money they make, but improves their lives, builds up the family, makes them morally better, which of course is a concern of the church. J.D. Vance, the hillbilly elegy. I mean, he's complaining a lot about, the loss of industry and a white kind of lower middle class that's been largely forgotten. I think of Ro Khanna, who sat at this table with me. We talked about a lot of similar things. Gosh, it seems to me there's common ground there, don't you think?
We have to
across the Republican-Democratic divide on this very point, that it's not just a matter of us making the most money for the most people, nor is it some kind of socialistic redistribution thing. But you're articulating a space which I think is very close to Catholic social teaching on the matter. But go ahead.
No, absolutely, I agree with that 100%. We have to find common ground.
Yeah.
And we have to look at the history of the parties, though. I mean, we just went through this big reconciliation process, the budget process in Washington. They're cutting the taxes for some of the wealthiest people in the country. That's going to cause massive deficits. Even Elon Musk said, I don't support this because it's going to cause all these deficits. Yeah. And several Republicans have come out and said how big the deficits are. They're cutting the taxes for some of the wealthiest people, I believe unnecessarily so. Even Trump had said at one time, we should raise taxes on people who make over $1 million or $2 million a year. That was abandoned, that idea. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, they're cutting the health care for some of the most vulnerable people in the country. So there's you can talk a good game,
Yeah.
and you can talk the talk, you can walk the walk. But we should try and find that common ground, like you said. And we have to recognize, though, that it's a push and pull as well. Even when we try and find common ground, there's still going to be some battles along the way. But that's okay. That's an exchange of ideas between lively minds.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Okay, so here's what stood out to me the most. First, I love that they're even having this conversation. Two guys from different worlds, right? One is a Catholic bishop and the other is a liberal congressman, but they're trying to find a common ground. And that's rare these days. I mean, when does this ever really happen? And from a Christian point of view, I think that the coming together of these two worlds, we need more of that. So the Bible talks a lot about caring for the poor, lifting up the vulnerable, building communities rooted in justice and mercy. And so oftentimes I think many people on the right think that's a left thing, and it's really not a left thing. It's a gospel thing. It's a kingdom thing. We also need to live morally upright lives, and many people think that that is a conservative thing when in reality it's a gospel thing. It's a kingdom thing as well. So we need both. So when the congressman says people are tired of the noise and just want the basics, jobs, education, healthcare, I totally understand that from his perspective. And I also understand Barron when he's talking about finding the common good and trying to show how there are conservatives that are speaking life into these places that this liberal congressman, well, he's basically saying that these are liberal spaces. It's really both sides trying to find this common ground. And I think that that common ground is something that both sides should strive for. But here's the challenge, and I think this is so important to think about as a Christian. You see, we just can't aim for unity for the sake of peace and to live quiet lives. We really do have to stand for biblical truth. And sometimes that means calling out the bad ideas on both sides, something that Barron has mentioned he is a proponent of. So, whether it's greed dressed up as freedom, kind of what I see in conservatism, or confusion disguised as compassion, what I see kind of in liberal circles, the reality is that we both need to be confronted with the truth. And the truth is Jesus, the good news about his kingdom, and that he is the king of that kingdom. And he rules and he reigns from on high. What's so important to see is that no political vision can replace the gospel. And ultimately, we're not made for this world in the way that it is now. We are really made for the new heavens and the new earth. And we should be longing for that. Our hope is in Jesus. And we need every person, regardless of your political affiliation, to have a changed heart and to really have that circumcision of heart that can produce these grand ideals that both Bishop Barron and this liberal congressman are talking about. All right, that's all I have for this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe. Remember that Christianity is Christ, and without him, there is no Christianity. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.